There's also, again, just the mission creep of it all. And I know that Russian talking points, settle down. Look, the West's appetite for forever wars doesn't exist, all right? Afghanistan, Iraq, from 2001 all the way through to, what, just a couple of years ago, continuous war. Billions and billions and billions and billions, let alone thousands of lives that were lost. And I think there's a certain view in people that they say, look, we're all in to defend Ukraine, we're willing to do so, but dear God, not another forever war. And I think the assumption was that when basically the entire Western world is giving Ukraine everything from what to shoot, as well as the information about where to shoot, that we might be in a different place 12 months down the road with basically the collective brain, all bar the boots.
Yes, look, that's right. I mean, the pro-war people keep saying, look, it's up to Ukraine to decide when to negotiate. But the reality is the US is funding practically 100% of this war, and the Allies are providing 100% of the munitions. So at any time they could say, look, you know, enough's enough. We're not going to do this anymore. And then, of course, Ukraine would have to negotiate. So I think that's a false argument. But you know, the sad thing for me about this war is there's so much propaganda. I mean, it's almost as bad as COVID. I mean, propaganda from governments. Basically saying that Ukraine's about to win. I mean, if you'd read the papers, you know, the last 500 days, you'd always think that Putin's about to pass out and die, or Russia's about to collapse under the weight of sanctions. And of course, none of those things have remotely happened. And Ukraine was given so much false hope, I thought, with this counteroffensive, which just logically, from first principles, was always going to be completely insane. You know, I mean, its neighbour is much, much more powerful and larger. It's right on the doorstep. The idea that Ukraine can break through those defences easily and puncture that land bridge, I think is just mad. Well, but that's what most people thought, and of course it never happened.
Yeah, well, these were the same people that said, you know, Iraq, liberators, all the rest of it. But of course, that machine, it just keeps pumping on, and they got all their talking points, and there's plenty of cuddles if you want to keep giving the machine what it wants, and plenty of cold shoulder if you don't. Last one before we finish. Axios had an interesting insight from a collection of people who work for Biden. Surprise, surprise, all of the touchy-feely stuff, and I mean literally touchy-feely sometimes, well, he's quite the crank behind the scenes. Now, rather than getting into the gossip of what he said and when, for the first 3 years, you didn't hear a sound from inside that White House. Now they're taking you right into the heart of how he behaves in the Oval Office. That's the story.
Yes, look, it's very interesting. I think the knives are really out amongst normally friendly journalists and friendly press. It's been quite stark in the last week or so, not just the Axios piece about his anger, but there's been pieces in the New York Times and in the Atlantic basically calling for him to stand down. And just a day or two ago, the most extraordinary one actually was the volume of leaking to CNN, which wrote a huge essay that basically said multiple people in the White House don't even think that Biden is going to run again. You know, that's quite a striking statement. These are multiple sources saying this. And indeed, if you look at the lack of staff in the campaign team, you know, that's a fact. And also the fundraising that they just put out, $72 million in the second quarter. That sounds like a lot, but Barack Obama about 8 years ago got 86 million, and there's been a lot of inflation since then. So really, that's a much poorer result. There's not the momentum there. So there's a number of things you can look at that suggest. Indeed, I've written this in the Australian. I don't think Biden will be the candidate. I think at some point at the end of this year, early next year, he changes his mind. But you know, that's obviously remains to be seen. But yeah, look, it's not looking good.
Well, and all the while, you know, Gavin Newsom just sort of parading around like, hey, look at this grass that's greener over here. I've got the fake teeth. I've got the car salesman look just like Joe, but I won't be, performing weird acts like he did in Europe. And I'll get to that in a second. Thank you very much, Adam. We'll keep reading you in the Oz.
Thanks, Paul.